What's good? What's good? What's good, everybody? Trying to get in the rhythm of getting back to making content. Right. I know it's been a little over a month. To be honest, when things are happening, it's really, really hard for me to make content. And I think the longer the days go by, it's hard to make content. When things are happening, and the longer I go, the harder it is to come back. I made a couple videos and didn't really like the way they were coming out. You know what I mean? Wasn't really that into it, and I pretty much vaulted them. I'm gonna have to do them over. Made a video about George Foreman and a few more recent fights that we had, and I'm gonna just do them over. I'm gonna do everything over. Um, but this fight here, I wanted to start with this breakdown between Jaron Ennis and Eimantas Stanionis that's happening this weekend. Um, I have a lot to talk about when it comes to this fight. I think this fight is a very, very important fight because this welterweight division has been dragging ever since, the Spences and the Crawfords and everyone else. It's kind of just been dragging along and it's not really it hasn't had any relevant fights since that big fight between Spence and Crawford. We have four champions now, and this is going to be the first unification match. This fight is going to be the Saturday on dazn. It's going to be tomorrow. The weigh-in is today. It's going to be at 8 p.m. Eastern, and I think the main event starts around 10:30 p.m. Eastern. All right. I'm going to try to go live. I should be going live. Um, but I will, when I get a chance, I will. I do have other videos that I'm going to put out on recent fights and recent news. All right, so I am gonna go back and catch up and play catch up. I don't want to just start off where things are right now. I do want to discuss some big topics in the next week. Okay. Um, Jaron Ennis, 27 years old now. He is the IBF champion at welterweight. 33 wins with 29 knockouts, no losses, no draws. He has a five. He's 5'10". He has a 74-inch reach. And you got Eimantas Stanionis, who's the WBA champ, with 15 wins and 9 knockouts, no defeats, no draws. All right. He's a little shorter. He's 5'8" and 68-inch reach. Okay, from Lithuania. Boots is from Philly. This fight is going to be in Atlantic City, so it's going to be in the backyard of Jaron Ennis. He won't be too far from home. He could take a nice little ride over to the boardwalk over there. Thought about going to the fight, but I wanted to try to push to go live since I haven't been on in some time. So, with that being said, you know, Jaron Ennis gets a lot of criticism. He's been very active though, but he gets a lot of criticism because his most recent performance against Shukajan, all right, Karen, and this was a rematch that no one wanted because it was one of the worst fights the previous year because Shukajan didn't really engage with him at all. He kind of ran the whole fight, and Ennis didn't really know how to like cut him off or get in range to really make it a fight. It really wasn't a fight. So he gets a lot of criticism, and I remember being live on that fight. I was with my dad, and there was a lot of things that I saw in that fight that went wrong. Um, and I think it was just preparation. I think it's a number of things. Now I've been listening to Boots's interviews this week, and it was hard for him to get up for that fight, and I believe him when he says that, because it's not a fight that he wanted. He hated the way the first fight went. So when he says it was hard to get up for that fight, I understand that. It's like he won, it was boring. He was like, how did this guy become the mandatory again for me? And like, I just beat him. You know what I mean? So I understand from that sense. Plus, you already fought him, and the guy didn't want to engage with you. So how do you prepare for a guy that didn't engage with you? Well, you work on being more aggressive, trying to keep up with his legs and try to cut him off and trap him in order to, to let your hands go. And I'm sure that's how they prepped for that fight. He didn't know that Shukashan was going to put the pressure on him and engage with him. And Shukashan looked very, very good, and I'm going to bring him up a few times in this video here, but the guy looked really good. I mean, the guy's angles were crazy, you know what I mean? He was really, really exposing Boots' lack of defense, and uh, this the angles, the movement and the angles were really on point. The counters was on point. It ended up being a tough fight. I mean, Boots still clearly won the fight, but I thought the fight was a little bit more competitive than the way the judges had it. And then on top of that, sometimes like the boxing dads, and I say this all the time, it's not the boxing dads is just like any other dad that's watching their child compete. Sometimes they get a little bit too emotionally attached. And being that this fight was a big fight in Philly, and was it in Philly? I might be thinking of the Avenesian fight. This might have been in Philly too. I know I went to Philly for the Avenesian fight, right? But you want to perform, and you want to perform in your home crowd. And his father was just more like, get him out of there, get him out of there. Wasn't really giving him too many instructions. I mean, he was, but kind of remind me of the Teofimo Lopez, George Camboso's fight, where his dad was like, come on, man, come on, get him out of there. And you prepped to stop this guy and didn't prep for that. And I think, and I'm hoping for Team Boots that they're preparing for everything in this fight. Because even though Stanionis kind of seems like he's one-dimensional, you want to prepare from what we know about him and what we've seen him do in other fights. But if there's a time in this fight where Team Boots have to make an adjustment, hopefully he gets those instructions in his corner, but hopefully he's ready to do that as well. And I'm basing a lot of things that I'm saying off the interviews he's had and what he said at the press conference and stuff like that. They're looking for a stoppage. You know what I mean? Well, he says he's not looking, but that's what they want. But hopefully they're not underestimating Stanionis based on what we just seen for him. Because there was a time before the Butayev fight where I thought I seen everything from Stanionis, not knowing that he had that jab. You get what I'm saying? Fighters prepare for their opponent, and being that this is both of their biggest fights, you don't completely know what to expect. We've seen what he's capable of doing, but be prepared to make adjustments if they have to get made. And I think Boots should not underestimate Stanionis based on how much of a favorite he is for this fight, based on what we've seen in his style and we've seen in other fights. When guys fight their biggest fight, they actually show up and do things that we haven't really quite seen before. And I'm not saying that Stanionis is going to completely change his style, but it's definitely something that I've seen fighters do before. It wouldn't be the first time I've seen it if it were to happen. Stanionis, being that he's not as popular as Boots, Boots' name has been connected with Crawford and Spence and Ortiz and all of this stuff. Stanionis has kind of had a streak of bad luck, but he's kind of been in the same position too. Being inactive, though, is one of the biggest issues, because just like Boots, both of these guys were emailed their titles. Bud moved up, dropped the titles, and these guys became champions. Stanionis with the WBA, with all the mess he's been in with that. I don't know if you guys remember, but at one point, there were like 3 WBA champions. It was like Ugas, Pacquiao, Stanionis. They were like interim, regular, super, mandatory. It was just a mess at one point when it came to the WBA title at welterweight. It was a mess. And then Spence actually was the full champion. But you had like 3 other guys that were like semi-full or something. I don't want to break it all down, but Stanionis was active at that time, fighting good fighters, but who was the real mandatory. And then when it came to time to fight Virgil Ortiz, which would have been his biggest fight at the time, he got injured. You know, Ortiz wasn't healthy, ended up sitting out for a while, moved up to 54. Stanionis was just sitting out and bench for 2 years. So he was coming off his biggest win against Bugatayev on the undercard of Spence and Ugas, which really put him on a map, that fight. I was here live. Nobody knew his jab looked like that. Like, that jab was crazy. And then he got benched for 2 years coming off his best performance against someone that beat him in the amateurs. And when he finally returned last year against Gabriel Maestre, he took another year off after that fight. You know, I mean, he won a fight, went the distance, and it's been a year since that fight. So he really hasn't been that active. You know, this is why this division is kind of dry right now. You know, but now these guys are fighting, and they got so much to prove to each other, because this is the first time both of them are actually fighting for a title instead of getting awarded a title. So this fight means a lot on both ends, both for Boots and Stanionis. Really looking forward to it. But as far as the styles, Jaron, we know that he's completely unorthodox. He's a switcher. He can literally do it all. He can fight in the pocket. He can use distance. You know, he can control the fight with his jab when he wants to. He has the height, the reach, great combinations, good angles, you know, good reflexes. We've seen him do it, you know what I mean? But more recently, at a higher level, both in the Shukajan rematch, was it the David Avanesian fight? He stopped David Avanesian in midway through the fight, but he got a lot of criticism. Why? Because he got hit a lot in the fight, but it made for a good fight. I went to the fight. I enjoyed it. Shukajan first fight didn't make him look good neither. You know what I mean? Roman Villa fight was a good look for him, though, because he was able to stop Villa, and we know what happened in the Rashidi Ellis fight with Villa. With that being said, though, I'm going to say this, and, you know, I've said this before. I think Ennis is at a point now where I know he wants to give us a good performance, and I know he wants to entertain the fans, and I'm all cool with that. But there's a time where when you fight at a certain level, the over flashy, you know, tricks and stuff, it's going to come to an end. You know, at this level now, fighting with your hands down, just trying to slip everything. This goes for Boots. This goes for the Josh Kellys, the Ben Whitakers. When you get to a certain level, you're not going to be able to do that against these guys, because you're going to put yourself in a defensive disadvantage. And I know he hasn't fought like quite a puncher, you know, someone that's dangerous enough to just put him down with one shot. But if he keeps engaging in this way, he might put himself in a bad place. And Stanionis, who's not a huge puncher, but he's probably one of the hardest punchers he's fought. You know what I mean? And this goes for those other fighters. I mean, even a guy like Lomachenko, when he got to a certain point in his career, all the matrix stuff had to stop. He had to fight every fight and be super technically sound and be very, you know, he had to, what's the word? He had to stick to the plan. He had to be strategic. because those guys at 135, they were bigger. The things he was doing at 126 against Nicholas Walters or against Sosa up at 130, he wasn't able to do that at 135. Those guys were bigger guys and they were better fighters too. You know what I'm saying? So there's going to be a point in your career where you have to take every fight seriously. It's all about winning now. It's not about just showboating. You know what I mean? If there's a time for it, yeah, there's some time for it. But I think going into a fight with your hands down and you're just trying to do all this, there's going to be a time where you can't do it anymore. You know, if you were to fight Terrence Crawford, would you go into a fight like that? No, you wouldn't. If you were to go into a fight with Spence, would you start that way? No. Um, he has to be strategic. He has to be smart, and he has to be ready for the adjustments. Um, him and his dad. Uh, Boots, I think some of the issues, major issues, the defensive flaws, being that he's a switcher, sometimes he switches a little too close. You know, I think he puts himself position for position and switching constantly. Sometimes he's just a little bit too close. Being that he's tall and rangy, he gives up his height and his reach a lot. You know, I think he relies on his reflexes, his upper body moving and just slipping, and doesn't keep his hands up enough. Sometimes he goes into a high guard and stuff, but sometimes he's trying to catch the shots and he's putting up the wrong glove on the wrong side, and the glove, you put your right hand up, the punch is coming from the left. You know what I'm saying? Like, uh, he rolls a lot of the punches though. He turns a lot of them. I mean, so a lot of the punches are not hitting him completely flush, but I just think that I would like to see him fight serious. And I would love for this fight to be that serious. Like, listen, you gotta pass for Jukajan, Karen. You gotta pass. You wasn't expecting a guy to come at you like that. I get it. David Avenesian, okay, you was in Philly for the first time. You sold a lot of tickets. You wanted to put on a show. You wanted to give us a fight. Cool. You took more hits. All right, cool. But now this is the real title shot. This is unification. This solidifies you currently as the best 47 fighter if you are to win. And the same goes for Stanionis. Stanionis, who's looked one-dimensional in a lot of his fights, he has a phenomenal jab. But he seems to like to want to sit in the pocket. You know what I mean? I think if Stanionis, who, you gotta be careful with what he says. And what I mean by that, I looked at the press conference and he's like, all gas, no break, or something like that. When I was gonna make this breakdown originally, I was gonna say I think Stanionis should come out very aggressive with his jab. Try to get Boots out of rhythm a little bit. Work behind a jab, create your offense behind a jab. You know what I mean? Keep Ennis on the back foot. Not that he can't fight that way, but work behind that jab. Yeah, is it going to give Boots some opportunities there to counter him? Yes. I think if Boots go into a southpaw position, it's going to make Stanionis, work behind the backhand a little bit more, lead with the backhand a little bit more. Obviously, he wouldn't be as active with his jab because both of their lead hands would be, facing each other. But at the end of the day, the jab, I think sometimes he just gets into this pocket exchange thing and he just goes into a high guard. And being that Boots is he got quicker hands, he throws more combinations. I think that puts him in a disadvantage. I think just being stationary against Boots is bad. Boots struggled in his last fight against Karen because of the fact that the guy was not stationary and he used his angles, but he's used his movements. He had better legs than Boots. You know, Stanionis being stationary, it's gonna make it more look like a Sergey Lipinets fight. You know what I mean? You don't want to be that. You want to use, I'm not saying he's going to be moving like Shukajan because I'm not expecting that. But what I do want, I do kind of want him to do that mid-range, long-range thing a little bit more, being that Boots normally gives up his length. He likes to step in, with his hands down at times, you know, hitting him with that power jab on his way in, and hook behind it to the body, you know. Um, the hook is important for Stanionis because you know, Boots again overextends at time. Sometimes he throw these wild big hooks, wide shots. He leaves himself open at times. So whatever position, whatever stance he's standing in, you know what I mean? Um, you want to work behind it. You want to catch him with the hook, especially because he will be close range at times. You know what I mean? I haven't really seen Boots really commit to staying on the outside and using his jab and moving and changing directions. I haven't seen him really have to do that because he's an action guy. He wants action. So I think Stanionis needs to take advantage of that. I think being that he is the underdog here, and I think he is a little outgunned going into the fight, I think he needs to be smart while still putting on the pressure, but smart pressure. And that's why I said if you can keep that distance between you two and just at least start off with being consistent with the jab, I think that could be very beneficial to him and creating more opportunities where you want Boots to start making mistakes and you countering off his mistakes. Go to the body, I mean, I think both should go to the body. Let's see how both have looked pretty durable up to this point, but go to the body a little bit more. I want to see how both look when they go to the body. Uh, I think overall though, whether this is an inside or outside pocket, in a pocket fight or a long range fight, um, I think Bulls have more. If you, I think the jab alone, I think Stanionis has that advantage, but I think every other thing, Boots have the advantage. I don't necessarily think like Stanionis is great at slipping, and I don't think he has the reflexes. I don't think he's a better athlete overall than Boots. Um, but if he's able to, like again, if he's able to outsmart Boots, I think he could give him a lot of trouble. Or maybe he can present something new in this fight. I don't know, but overall, I think Boots is going to win the fight. I don't know how durable Stanionis is. You know what I mean? But I do think that even though there's more on the line for this fight, I think the Shukajan style was more difficult than Stanionis' style, based on what I've seen from him. I know Stanionis has angles. You know what I mean? I know he has a great jab. But that fight that Karen fought is a more difficult style. I haven't seen any one of them fight anyone that's exactly the same, but I think Stanionis' style is more similar to whose Boots already has faced. Maybe a few guys more so than the other way around. I know Stanionis has said he's fought guys like him in the amateurs, but at this level, um, I haven't really seen anyone fight anywhere as close. They have one opponent in common, or at least that I know of, is Thomas Delorme. And, Stanionis went the distance with him, whereas Boots stopped him in one round. And then, I think they fought maybe a year apart. Yeah. Stanionis fought him in 2021. Boots fought him in like, oh, they fought the same year, 2021. He just fought him later that year. And I'm not basing everything off just the one common opponent. Boots is obviously the KO artist between the two. But at the same time, you know what I mean? That's all we have to go by. Stanionis has fought Louis Collazo, who's a southpaw. Um, a very old Louis Collazo. So he doesn't really give anything that Boots can do, even as a southpaw. Um, Butayev was a switcher, but Butayev was very stationary. He just sat in the pocket with him, and they just traded. But Stanionis had the jab. You know what I mean? He was just connecting better and more consistently. So I like Boots for this fight. I haven't decided if I'm gonna place any bets yet. I normally tell you guys in the live. So if I put any money down, I'll let you guys know on the live when I get on. Um, but I have Boots winning. I'm thinking, I can see it going in distance, but I can also see Boots just rallying. You know, I just don't think Stanionis really has it to compete with Boots over time. Again, I just think certain styles. I don't think his style is really as good as he is, and I do think he's the second best welterweight. I just don't think his style matches up well with Boots right now. You know what I mean? I just don't. I think of Brian Norman's. I would probably have Stanionis. I don't want to go into all that because I want to see how this fight look first. But he's too stationary, and then once he go into the high guard thing, that's a problem. That's gonna be a problem for him. All right. Anyway, let me know what you guys think of the content. Comments. Hope you enjoy the content, man. And I'll see you guys with more very soon. All right. Y'all have a good one. Peace.